150 years of hidden knowledge now exposed in our video. When your acid and alkaline is out of balance, the pH levels in your blood are compromised. Then your body is open to sickness and disease. For the funguses among us, already living and alive in human blood, for your blood is the river of your own life. What you put into that river is the outcome and direct cause of your health today. Our video will cover the science and the discoveries made over the years by people having similar ideas from different sources, all doing private research and not publishing in known medical journals. It is unfortunate that many caring scientists work in isolation, and for one reason or another a lot of information known by one is unknown by the others. Because their information is not shared or given hierarchical credit, many who follow are left in the dark and without the full picture. The world of medicine as we know it is going in a different direction. Why? Our video will explain their reasoning and what you can do to protect your own health. You will discover that it is in your own hands as we expose this hidden knowledge today. Move on and upward with this most important and informative video. Healing takes place in the blood. Here is a view of live blood under the microscope. What is going on here with this sample? Red blood cells, shown in this sample, is called rouleau, because the blood cells are stacked. This is the worst stage of protein linkage. Suggested cause of the protein linkage: often poor protein digestion. The pancreas may be off, excess dietary protein, poor assimilation, eating too much animal protein, blood too toxic, altered blood pH from stress, coffee, cigarettes, meat, etc., dehydration, not drinking enough water, which, by the way, is one of the top undiagnosed causes of many ailments. Possible signs: fatigue, shortness of breath, red blood cells cannot carry oxygen, stress on heart, cold hands and feet, poor circulation, as rouleau may be caused by acute phase protein elevations in the blood. The possibility of serious disease complications exist when as does not respond to nutritional therapy. If rouleau does not disappear after a maximum of 7 days, and there is no evident tissue inflammation, tissue damage or tissue necrosis, additional testing can be conducted to rule out arthritis, arteritis disease, cystitis, cirrhosis, diabetes, endocarditis, rheumatic diseases, rheumatic heart, hepatitis, hypothyroidism, chronic infection, nephritis, systemic lupus, ulcer, colitis, neoplastic disease. Also keep in mind that the wrong diet for one's blood type, A, O, B, AB, can agglutinate the blood. Certain food lectins are incompatible with certain blood types. The topics of lectin chemistry, proteins, prions, all should someday get coordinated research. Now let's begin our study on pH balance of the human bloodstream. The pH regulatory system of the body is based on the pH balance of the human bloodstream, is recognized by all medical physiology texts as one of the most important biochemical balances in all of human body chemistry. pH is the acronym for potential hydrogen. In definition, It is the degree of concentration of hydrogen ions in a substance or solution. It is measured on a logarithmic scale from 0 to 14. Higher numbers means the substance is more alkaline in nature, and there is a greater potential for absorbing more hydrogen ions. Lower numbers indicate more acidity with less potential for absorbing hydrogen ions. Our body pH is very important, because pH controls the speed of our body's biochemical reactions. It does this by controlling the speed of enzyme activity as well as the speed that electricity moves through our body. The higher, more alkaline the pH of a substance or solution, the more electrical resistance that substance or solution holds. Therefore, electricity travels slower with higher pH. All biochemical reactions and electrical life energy are under pH control. If we say something has an acid pH, we are saying it is hot and fast. As an example, look at the battery of your car. It's an acid battery. On cold days you want it to be hot and ready, and you want your car to start fast. Alkaline pH, on the other hand, biochemically speaking, is slow and cool. Compare it to an alkaline battery in a flashlight. You want that battery to be cool and to burn out slowly. Here is an example of how pH can control. Look around you at society in general. Do you see people getting exhausted, burned out, and quick to anger? Do you see a rise in violence? In part it could be due to the fact that people today lean to an acid pH. As a society we are running hot and fast. How did we get there? We guzzle coffee for breakfast, acid. Burgers for lunch, acid. Wash it down with king-size colas, acid. And have a pizza, more acid for dinner. In fact, with this scenario, you could easily correlate the rise of violence in our society with the increasing number of fast food restaurants on every corner. But I digress. However, this does lead me to the second part of the pH and digestive metabolic equation. pH is under the direct control of what we put into our mouths. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? What we eat and drink will impact where our body's pH level falls, and our body's pH will control the activity of every metabolic function happening in our body. pH is behind the body's electrical system and intracellular activity, as well as the way our bodies utilize enzymes, minerals, and vitamins. That is why pH is one of the first things to be looked at if you are experiencing unbalance in your body in any way, shape, or form. And since our body's pH level is a direct result of what we eat and drink, anytime we are experiencing imbalance, we need to look at what we have historically been eating and drinking, because this impacts our pH. It's a circle. You can't look at one without looking at the other. What we eat and drink is directly tied to the functioning of our digestive system, from our mouth through our small intestines and through our colon. That system plays the most important part in our physical well-being. This system, what we feed it, and how it impacts our pH, is the essential core that determines whether we have perfect health or not. It is really so simple. Now you may be thinking that all of this makes perfect sense. It is so simple that you would think that modern medicine could look at it, put two and two together and simply attempt to bring people back into balance through the food that they eat. Hippocrates said, "Let food be your medicine. Let medicine be your food." If it were only so simple. Modern medicine has gotten to where it is today in part through a scientific and philosophical debate that culminated in the 19th century. On one side of the debate was French microbiologist Antoine Béchamp. On the other side was French microbiologist Louis Pasteur. Béchamp and Pasteur strongly disagreed in their bacteriological theories. They argued heatedly about who was correct. It was the argument that changed the course of medicine. Pasteur promoted a theory of disease that described non-changeable microbes as the primary cause of disease. This is the theory of monomorphism. This theory says that a microorganism is static and unchangeable. It is what it is. Disease is solely caused by microbes or bacteria that invade the body from the outside. This is the germ theory. Béchamp held the view that microorganisms can go through different stages of development and they can evolve into various growth forms within their life cycle. This is the theory of pleomorphism. He observed microbe-like particles in the blood which he called microzymas. These microbes would change shape as individuals became diseased, and for Béchamp, this was the cause of disease. Hence disease comes from inside the body. Another scientist of the day, Claude Bernard, entered into the argument and said that it was actually the milieu or the environment that is all important to the disease process. Microbes do change and evolve, but how they do so is a result of the environment, or terrain, to which they are exposed. Hence, for Béchamp, microbes, being pleomorphic, will change according to the environment to which they are exposed. Therefore, disease in the body, as a biological process, will develop and manifest dependent upon the state of the internal biological terrain. At the core of that terrain is pH. Both men acknowledged certain aspects of each other's research, but Pasteur was the stronger, more flamboyant, and more vocal opponent when compared to the quiet Béchamp. Pasteur also came from wealth and had the right family connections. He went to great lengths to disprove Béchamp's view. Pasteur eventually managed to convince the scientific community that his view alone was correct. Béchamp felt that this diverted science down a deplorable road, a road that held only half the truth. On his deathbed, Pasteur finally acknowledged Béchamp's work and said, "Bernard was correct. The microbe is nothing. The terrain is everything." It was a 180-degree turnaround. With his death imminently at hand, he as much as admitted that his germ theory had flaws. But his admission fell on deaf ears. It was far too late. It could not reverse the inertia of ideas that had already been accepted by mainstream science at that time. Allopathic, drug-based medicine was firmly entrenched on the road that was paved by Pasteur. The result of that road is what you see today practiced as medicine. When a body is out of balance, doctors attempt to put it back into balance, first through drugs, then through surgery. The general effect is to remove the symptoms, not to deal with the ultimate cause of the ailment. Fortunately, there have been and are today scientists who have continued along the other road, the road ignored by Pasteur. They have continued the pleomorphic line of research, and think much more about the terrain, which is largely ignored in the United States. For example, the American medical establishment rarely looks at live blood. Their practice of staining blood with chemicals kills it. It also kills the ability to really see what is going on. But in looking at live blood, you can clearly see that there are forms that look like bacteria, microorganisms and parasites that not only are in the blood, but that over time can grow and can change their shapes. Some researchers suggest these forms are markers for pathogenic, disease-producing states. This ability of microorganisms to change is the concept of pleomorphism we've been discussing. Understanding this concept is essential to the understanding of cancer and its cure, and the cure of many other diseases. Looking at live blood under a microscope is an incredible learning tool, and begins an incredible journey whereby we come to understand that there are dynamic life processes going on every second in our bodies. It is an environment that is an ever-changing canvas of life, that holds forms that develop and grow and illustrates what some call the fungus among us. Today, researchers who want to observe living blood use standard laboratory microscopes with high magnification that are specially set up to view the blood under dark field or phase contrast conditions. With dark field, this means that the blood sample being viewed is actually in front of a dark background and light is being angled onto the blood sample from the sides. Under phase contrast conditions, the light coming through the specimen is shifted slightly out of phase with itself. These techniques allow nearly invisible microorganisms within the blood to be lit up and seen. It also clearly delineates the blood cells. This method is in contrast to the standard microscope bright field conditions, where light shines directly through the viewed sample. Using this kind of microscope technology, German bacteriologist Günther Enderlein, a student of Bechamp, observed tiny microorganism-like elements which he called protids. He stated that these tiny elements flourished in the blood cells, in the plasma body fluids, and in the tissues, living in harmony with the body in a symbiotic, or mutually beneficial relationship. He considered the protids as one of the body's smallest, organized, biological units. The most interesting thing about this microorganism is its ability to change and adapt to its environment. It was observed that when there was severe change or deterioration in the body's internal environment, mostly noted by changes in pH, these elements would pass through several different stages of cyclic development, advancing from harmless agents to disease-producing, pathological, bacteria or fungi. His other researchers have continued along a similar path of Enderlein, and have promoted their own ideas of these things in the blood. Gaston Nessens observed the elemental particle which Enderlein called the protid, and he described that it had a life cycle. He called Enderlein's protid a somatid. Nessens believes this protid, somatid, predates DNA, and carries ongenetic activity. It is the first thing that condenses from light energy, and is the link between light and matter. Virginia Livingston Wheeler also researched these elements, and called one supposedly developmental form of it progenitor cryptosides. Progenitor meaning it existed through millennia, and cryptosides being a cellular killer, essentially the ancestral hidden killer, cancer. Like Nessens, Livingston also did cancer research. Some of her research was done along with two other women, Eleanor Alexander Jackson and Irene Diller. They referred to this microbe as the cancer microbe. Here we have similar ideas from different sources, all doing private research, and not publishing in known journals. It is unfortunate that many scientists work in isolation, and for one reason or another a lot of information known by one is unknown by the others. Because information is not shared, or given hierarchical credit, many who follow are lost in the dark, and without the full picture. Remember that blood is under pH control. Ideally it has a pH in a narrow range around 7.3, which is slightly alkaline. In Enderlane's theory, a pH around 7.3 is the perfect environment in which the element he called the protein lives in harmony with the body. But when blood pH is disturbed, and is shifted out of that narrow range, these tiny elements, which hit though of us living microorganisms, can no longer survive. In order to survive, he suggested that they would change to a form which can survive. It is these new forms that he stated can become aggressive, parasitic, and pathogenic agents within the blood. Dr. Renderlane contended there are thousands of forms, and many of these are able to overcome the body's defense mechanisms, causing multiple disease situations. Some call it the cleptic microbe. Dark-field microscopic studies conducted by Dr. Rudolf Volsleben and Dr. Kurt Donsbach of the Hospital Santa Monica clearly illustrated the proliferation of many diverse elemental forms in the blood of their sick patients. What they observed was the dance of these microbial-looking forms in an expansive state and increasing with the pathology of their patients. They called it the cleptic microbe. Examining their patients' lived blood revealed many of these microbial-looking forms darting to and fro in the blood plasma. The more ill the patient, the more forms observed. The sickest patients had swarming hordes of these forms within the blood, said to be causing great stress to their immune systems. The doctors learned that cleaning the blood of these forms allowed the rejuvenation of the immune system to progress in an orderly and rapid fashion. Curious scientists who spend a lot of time in the laboratory looking at live blood under the microscope often start to wonder about the pleomorphic concept. When they see the changes in the blood taking place, and correlated with the progression of the disease process, many begin to see a pattern unfolding. This has prompted some to state that the over-acidification of the body, caused by an inverted way of eating and living, causes a proliferation of the fungus among us which debilitates the body, and, if not corrected, will ultimately cause our demise. Looked at in this light, it could be said that all illness is but this one constitutional disease. The result is mycotoxicosis, toxicity caused by mycotic infection, or in other words, by a yeast and fungus infection. These are the great decomposers of living and dead bodies. From ashes to ashes and dust to dust, This is nature's decomposing mechanism at work. Fascinating, isn't it? If you begin to understand this concept, you will begin to understand the prime reason why we get sick, and how we get sick, and you will realize that much of modern medicine is looking under the wrong stones for answers to many disease questions. They need to be looking at the environmental factors in and around the body itself. For years now, medicine has considered blood to be a sterile environment. But they're wrong. Unfortunately, dead wrong for some of their patients. Blood is not a sterile environment, nor is it a static environment. That environment can change, most notably through diet, and microbial appearing forms in the blood can evolve and change too. The fact is, we can see this type of evolution and change going on throughout all of nature. If you leave a bowl of milk out on the kitchen table for a few days without refrigeration, it will turn sour fairly quickly. Did it turn sour because there was an outside germ that got into the milk? Probably not. It turned sour because tiny microbes already in the milk changed their form to adapt to a changed environment. The disease paradigm shift. One school of thought, modern medicine, says most diseases caused by germs or some form of static disease-causing microbe, the germ theory. In order to get well, you should kill the germs. Kill the microbes. Kill whatever is making you sick. Drugs, antibiotics, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. The other school of thought, which encompasses most other forms of the healing arts unrelated to mainstream medicine, and quite often is battling government, says most diseases caused by some unbalance in the body. The unbalance occurs in some nutritional, electrical, structural, toxicological or biological equation. In order to get well, you need to re-establish balance in your body, by working with your body, not against it. For the pleomorphic scientists like Enderlein, Nessens, Livingston, and others, disease is in large measure a function of biology. It is a biologically driven event that takes place in the body when metabolic processes are thrown off. These metabolic processes are thrown off largely by dietary, nutritional and environmental factors. Embracing the biological view gives new insights into the disease process, and is truly another paradigm for all illnesses but one constitutional disease, result of mycotoxicosis. Toxicity brought about by mycotic infection. An example, yeast and fungus infection, the great decomposers of life. Understand this, then understand disease. Your blood is not a sterile environment and open to disease. Now for the biology of disease. Colloids are particles that measure 0.01 to 0.0001 microns in diameter. That's about 400,000ths to 4 millionths of an inch. It has been hypothesized by some that there is some point in space and time where the colloids of life, the smallest of particles capable of expressing biological life in the physical realm, were begotten from the colloids of light. The spiritual realm. The first individual to maybe catch a glimpse of this occurrence was Antonio Wenhick, who lived in the 17th century. He had ground glass to create the first microscope. In observing some rainwater he collected, he made note that there were tiny creatures moving about. Wondering where they came from, he did an experiment. He collected clean, fresh rainwater and sealed it in pipettes. At first, nothing was in the water. Hours and a few days later, still nothing was in the water. But on the fourth day, all of a sudden, little teeny creatures appeared. Where did they come from? It was spontaneous generation. Life out of light. Leo Wenhick took his research to Robert Boyle, the father of chemistry as we know it, and to Sir Isaac Newton, who wrote many of the principles of physics. They did not believe that life could be get from light, or in the way of thinking, from nothing. This was a time when the church played a big role in every major decision that was made. To have life, you must have procreation, a mother-father union. Since there was no mother or father that created Leo Wenhick's teeny creatures, his observations were surely flawed, and they were dismissed. What could not be dismissed, however, was the observation of a newly discovered microscopic world. It was a foundation for developing the beginning ideas of the germ theory. But what the germ theory failed to explain then, and fails to explain to this day, is the answer to the question: from where exactly do germs come? Where is the mother-father microbe? In any textbook of science, medicine, or biology, there is no explanation. When the germ theory took hold in the early years of biological science, the religious dogma of the time shaped the scientists' thoughts who formulated the theories. Since they had no concrete evidence to answer the question, they left it unanswered. And it remains unanswered today. And this is where a new paradigm unfolds. Germs and microbes are physical life forms. Life forms which have evolved from something. Since that something is not physically measurable, then it must be something that is on a higher vibrational or spiritual level. Hence, colloids of light, which beget the colloids of life. For an empirical scientist, speaking about colloids of light is akin to speaking mumbo-jumbo. How can there possibly be a spiritual or higher vibrational particle of existence, which for lack of better understanding I've called a colloid of light, which is unseen and unmeasurable? And how can a supposed colloid of light become a colloid of life? In answer to the first question, the truth of the matter is, empirical science only goes as far as the current state of physical technology allows. To go beyond that, you have to turn to inner guidance, intuition, and quite frankly, to a quantum physical or spiritual perspective. Regarding the second question, how can colloids of light become colloids of life? Doing an experiment can help to find an answer. From the writings of Dr. Kurt Donsbach, he calls this experiment making protozoa. The protozoa is among the most primitive and simplest of life forms. In any biology textbook, you'll never find a description of where protozoa come from, but yet you can create them in a test tube. If you take sterile water and put in some fresh hay or other grasses, then mix it up, you will have a solution that, upon microscopic examination, has nothing in it. You can scrape the blades of grass with a knife, and observe the scrapings, and you will still find nothing. But cork the tube, wait a few days and come back. Your mix will be teeming with bacteria, amoebas, and protozoa. Where did they come from? Under time-lapse photography, you would observe an amazing transformation. The grass blades would lose their striations and become more vesicular, filled with little bubbles or vacuoles. The vacuoles would begin to merge and gradually form a common membrane. After a few days, the little mass begins to move with a rhythmic, pulsing motion. Eventually the pulsing motion becomes more pronounced, and the glob appears to gather more energy. Soon it breaks away from the grassy shaft, and is a living mass, classified in biology texts as protozoa. From this point it can differentiate itself, and other microorganisms appear. Fascinating, isn't it? Just what was that pre-protozoan mass pulsing with? Is it the beginnings of life? Could it be what's called the life force, or prana, kai, ek, the Holy Spirit? The higher vibrational essence of spirit, the spark of God? Colloids of light, the spiritual, higher vibrational stuff, beget the colloids of life, the physical manifestation of animate material substance. It is a recurring suggestion by some that just as in our protozoan experiment, when turning to the blood, we find colloids of life, and those colloids of life have an urge to merge. How they merge, what they turn into, their developmental function, all will be dependent upon the terrain, or the environment to which they are exposed. Voila! We've just uncovered the pleomorphic theory. Microbes change based upon the environment in which they live. The human body strives to maintain the pH of the blood at around 7.3. Above or below this level, the colloids in your blood merge into forms that can look kind of scary when viewed under a microscope. One contention is that these forms constitute pathogenic microbes. Another, more likely scenario based on the latest DNA studies discussed later, is that these forms seen in the blood are not really life forms with their own DNA, but are forms that develop in synchronicity with pathogenic situations, that develop as a result of internal terrain modifiers which also affect immune function. In essence, the vast majority of scariforms seen in the blood are recombinations of cellular breakdown byproduct, which in itself is not necessarily a good thing, because if you are seeing it in the blood, what does it mean about your internal and overall health? Taking another look back at Enderlane, he believed that at one stage of development, the forms created by the colloids of life in the blood serve a useful function. Platelet formation is one example. He suggested that platelets are formed out of living colloids in the blood, and they serve us through the blood clotting mechanism, a mechanism without which we would bleed to death from even the smallest injury. But, just as the colloids that merge together as platelets might serve us well, if the terrain of our blood is shifted due to an inverted way of eating and living, even these platelets themselves can change their shape, or clump together, or march in step with rising pathogenicity. More on these concepts later. The colloidal substances in the blood can form together in trillions of ways, specifically how and to what appearances dependent on the environment, chemical makeup, pH, etc. From bacterial to viral to fungal, any microbial changes, when they begin happening in your body, is one suggested mechanism through which you age, become diseased, die, and ultimately are returned to the colloids from which you were assembled. As from dust you are, and to dust you shall return. The microscope is an incredible tool to delve into this world and educate oneself on the reflection of disease process. By looking at live blood immediately after taking it out of a finger, the myriad forms in the blood become apparent. What forms you see depends on your state of health. Above are two views of live blood as seen with a video microscope. The picture on top shows 1. The red blood cells floating in plasma. 2. A microbial-looking form endolane called a synocyte, but what we know in hematology to be a basic myelinamorphous phospholipid-oriented formation. This is basically cellular breakdown byproduct. Endolane associated, seeing these along with other signs as an indication of a present or pending degenerative disease situation. 3. Round phospholipid formations capable of absorbing water and bubbling with activity. Some individuals who work with a microscope would call these puffy white round forms yeast in the blood, but that is usually without validation, as any form in the blood could not be defined in this fashion without specific DNA staining. 4. Spread platelet. The patient with this blood had periods of fatigue and low energy, nothing specific diagnosed, though the presence of the wormy-looking myelin form would be suspicious if other ill health signs were present. The picture on the bottom is from a patient diagnosed with inoperable cancer and given 30 days to live. The plasma field and red blood cells, what's left of them, are filled with cellular breakdown byproducts. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, the microbes are starting to do their job and overtake the body. An interesting case history. The picture of blood above of the cancer patient leads to a pertinent story. The story involves how this patient came about getting her cancer into remission. She was diagnosed as inoperable, and her medical doctor told her, because of her very poor state of health, there was nothing more they could do, and she had maybe 30 days to live. At the time, her husband had been seeing an alternative care practitioner for a problem of his own. In his practice, this particular doctor happened to work with a microscope for patient education. As a last-ditch effort, the man brought his wife in, hoping that maybe something, anything, could be done. As they sat in the office, she had such low energy she could barely keep her head held up. Her face was completely white. The blood was taken from her finger and put under the microscope. Then the doctor peered into the eyepiece. What he saw, or more to the point, what he didn't see, astonished him. The woman had practically no red blood cells, and what she did have didn't look very good. There were microbial-looking forms all over the place. Given the situation, where here is a woman that is next to dead, what can you do? Well, the doctor said he didn't know if it would help, but he pulled 4 key nutritional substances off his shelf and gave them to her. These were a total vitamin and mineral complex, digestive enzymes, a proanthocyanidin, pycnogenol, antioxidant compound, and heavy-duty metabolic body enzymes. After a little bit of talking about these substances and nutritional concepts, the couple left the office. When the doctor peered into the microscope after they left, which was about 30 to 40 minutes later, he couldn't believe his eyes. The parasitic-looking creature elements were everywhere, consuming everything left in the blood. The picture on the previous slide is some of what he saw. 1 week after taking the nutritional supplements, the woman had renewed energy and was actually feeling better. She went back to her traditional doctor and wanted to have a blood test. The test was performed, and her red blood cell count had shot up dramatically. The doctor was rubbing his hands together, thinking that now they could restart her on something like chemotherapy. She said something to the effect of, "No thanks, doc. I just wanted another opinion. Bye for now." Since the hospital had essentially given her up for dead, she didn't want anything to do with them, or with their killer medicines. With her renewed energy and new hope, she started seriously looking at alternative treatment options. She settled on a course of action and found what she wanted south of the border in Mexico. 90 days later she was doing fantastically well, with her cancer in remission. What got her to turn the corner? An alternative healthcare practitioner with a microscope who understood the importance of key nutritional elements to the body. The body is such an incredible thing that if you work with it correctly, instead of against it, it is capable of tremendous self-healing. Now for the pH equation, and health is, according to many health researchers, total healing of chronic illness takes place only when, and if the blood is restored to a normal, slightly alkaline pH. In case you missed it, let me say it again. Total healing of chronic illness takes place only when, and if the blood is restored to a normal, slightly alkaline pH. The magnitude of meaning behind this research is of incredible importance to someone who is fighting a disease, overcoming an illness, or just desiring to feel better. What it means is this: your body pH affects everything. Human blood stays in a very narrow pH range right around 7.3. Below or above this range means symptoms and disease. When pH goes off, microbial-looking forms in the blood can change shape, mutate, mirror pathogenicity, and grow. When pH goes off, enzymes that are constructive can become destructive. When pH goes off, oxygen delivery to cells suffers. Word about oxygen. More and more research is showing that low oxygen delivery to cells is a major factor on most, if not all, degenerative conditions. Nobel laureate Dr. Otto Warburg of Germany won his Nobel Prize for his discovery of oxygen deficiency in the cancer growth process. As stated above, when pH is off and our bodies are running more acidic, our cells are getting less oxygen. Cancer thrives under an acid tissue pH, oxygen-deficient environment. Is it any wonder today that cancer rates are up? To recall how important oxygen is to your life, just stop breathing for a minute. Get the idea? Each cell in your body can breathe fully or not. Which it is depends upon having an optimum pH balance. Do you think keeping an eye on your body pH might be important in your life? pH controls the things you can't live without, like your brain. Your brain needs fuel to run, and the fuel it uses is glucose. But unlike other cells, your brain can't store glucose. It depends on the second-to-second supply from the bloodstream, a bloodstream that is affected by pH, which controls the efficiency of insulin, which allows sugar to enter into cells, which in turn controls blood sugar levels. Your heart. William Philpott MD in his Biomagnetic Handbook made an important body pH electrical connection. As the pH of the blood goes more acid, fatty acids which are normally electromagnetically charged on the negative side switch to positive, and automatically are attracted to, and begin to stick to the walls of arteries which are electromagnetically charged on the negative side. And the science states, opposites attract. It should start to make sense that a society which overemphasizes food that could push blood to be more acid will have a high rate of heart disease. And so it goes. pH control impacts every biochemical process in the body, including enzymes which are part of that biochemical process. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of enzyme processes which take place in the body. Many are so specific that they are like complex square pegs that need to fit into specific square holes in order to carry out their duty. If blood pH is off balance even a little, some important pegs are not fitting their respective slots. Enzyme function and thus life itself begins to suffer. Mineral assimilation is affected by pH. Minerals have different pH levels at which they can be assimilated into the body. Minerals on the lower end of the atomic scale can be assimilated in a wider pH range, and minerals higher up on the scale require a narrower and narrower pH range in order to be assimilated by the body. For example, sodium and magnesium have wide pH assimilation ranges. It narrows somewhat for calcium and potassium, narrows more for manganese and iron, more for zinc and copper, more for iodine. Iodine, which is high up on the atomic scale, requires near-perfect pH for its assimilation into the body. Iodine, you may know, is one of the most important minerals for proper functioning of the thyroid. But the thyroid doesn't get access to iodine unless the body pH is near-perfect. With a society in a largely pH unbalanced state, one would suspect a lot of thyroid problems. Malfunctioning thyroids have been connected to arthritis, heart attacks, diabetes, cancer, depression, overweight, fatigue and more. Are you starting to see the basic metabolic picture evolving here? Due primarily to agricultural soil depletion and over-acidic food consumption, mineral deficiency is a large problem facing most people today. And mineral deficiency relates to the quantity of life energy, or, more specifically, electricity, in our bodies. Body mineral content and balances control the quantity of electricity in our bodies. The speed at which the electricity flows is controlled by the body's pH balance. pH balance and the mineral connection. There are complex biochemical processes taking place in the body constantly in an attempt to keep blood pH as near perfect as possible. These are known as the pH buffering systems. These buffering systems need a good balance of minerals to work effectively. If we are getting inadequate mineral intake from the food we eat, we are going to start having problems with our pH balancing systems. And if our pH is unbalanced, what is the result? Well, by now you should start having a good idea. Pick your disease, choose your unbalance. Cancer, arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, chronic fatigue, allergies, obesity, just name it. If you don't feel good, one of the basic things that stands between you and perfect health is your body's pH, your basic metabolic body balance. While we're on the subject of minerals, did you know that minerals are as important as, if not more important than, vitamins? Minerals are coenzymes which help vitamins function. In the absence of minerals, vitamins can't do their job. Many minerals are referred to as trace minerals, which might make it seem as though they are of little importance, but nothing could be further from the truth. Minerals and their deficiencies have been implicated in a wide range of off-balance health conditions. Here are some examples. Supplementing a diet with sufficient chromium and vanadium can help prevent diabetes, and has been seen to reverse diabetes in those already diabetic, as vanadium is reportedly able to replace insulin in some cases. Copper deficiency is implicated in aneurysms, brain, aortic, etc. Magnesium is quite possibly the most important mineral for the reduction of coronary heart disease. The latest cutting-edge research shows that heart disease is really a function of heart muscle acidosis. Boron helps keep calcium in the bones, helps women preserve and make estrogen, and helps men keep testosterone. Boron affects alertness. Boron can help eliminate arthritis. Potassium and magnesium, along with organic sodium, are some of the most important minerals for rebalancing the electrical properties of the cell, for eliminating excess acidity, and for helping to balance calcium. Magnesium helps conduct electrical messages between all the neurons of the body. People get irrational when potassium levels are low. Zinc is involved in over 200 brain enzyme interactions. Drinking zinc mixed with distilled water can stop anorexia nervosa in a day. Zinc deficiency symptoms include loss of taste and smell. Zinc deficiency in children results in moodiness, depression, irritability, photophobia, light sensitivity, antagonism, temper tantrums and learning problems. Children who do poorly on achievement tests tend to have low iron levels. These children also display disruptive, impulsive, and irritable behavior in the classroom. Children who have high lead levels do more poorly overall. Most of these children's mineral imbalances go undiagnosed, and instead are medicated with drugs. Likewise, attention deficit disorder can often be eliminated by balancing nutritional trace minerals. There is no need to drug our children. Cigarette smoke is rich in cadmium, the blue color in the smoke. Cadmium is the most neurotoxic substance known to human beings. A low zinc, high cadmium ratio is implicated in learning disabilities. Zinc is needed to balance cadmium. Too much copper is an irritant to the brain. A story is told by Dr. Alex Shorss, a noted author, researcher, and nutritional mineral expert. It is about his experience with a 9-year-old boy brought into his clinic some years ago. The boy had been charged with attempted murder. His criminal record began at age 6. He burned animals, shot at people's houses and beat up mothers pushing baby strollers. The police all said he would be a lifetime criminal, a Charles Manson type of psychotic. He was on 6 psychiatric drugs, and was kicked out of school after he tried to kill a 10-year-old girl. Dr. Shores did a hair mineral analysis and discovered his copper levels were off the charts. He added supplemental zinc to the boy's diet to chelate out the excess copper, and within 2 weeks the boy's urinalysis showed all the excess copper had been eliminated. He went off all medication, returned to school and became a model student. Years later the boy returned to see Dr. Shores. He was a junior in college, an A student, on the varsity basketball team, and had a heart of gold. High manganese levels show statistically high correlation with violent behavior, while lithium balances and helps control manganese. The cities of the world with the highest lithium concentration in their water show the lowest homicide rates. The trace element rubidium cures manic depression. The right ratio of copper to zinc in the cell acts as an antioxidant. This information shows just a teeny fraction of how minerals and mineral imbalances can affect your health. Much of this information is buried in professional journals, they're for the taking. It appears that due to politics and the influence and strength that the medical drug industrial complex has over the suppression of information, these things stay buried. If this type of information, along with the other things we know, could be assimilated into our society, whether through the efforts of individuals or that of our government, and if people like doctors, psychiatrists, and dietitians were to act on it, we could lessen violence in our society, close jails, raise academic achievement, and greatly reduce outlays of public money for Medicare and Medicaid. We could see our health insurance premiums drop to about $50 a month for a family of 4, because we could eliminate our need for expensive hospital visits and treatments accepting emergency care for accidents. Without a doubt, the single most important thing you can do for your health is to supplement your diet with broad-spectrum trace minerals. They are that important. Your disease is in perfect harmony with your body from what you've learned so far. You should begin to understand the truth of this statement. When your body's mineral balances are off, your health is off. When your body's pH and basic metabolic processes are off, it sets up the internal environment that becomes the new playground for the opportunistic bugs, bacteria, viruses, fungi, etc. Earlier we talked of the concept of colloids of life in your blood, like the elemental forms called protones, somatids, vis-a-vis, endolane and nescens. Whether actual life or not, one thing that is certain is how colloidal particles form and ultimately evolve is a function of pH, the terrain of the blood. What else is a constituent of the blood? How about the mineral balances we've been speaking about? Research has shown that microorganisms can evolve into different-looking forms when exposed to and combined with elements like heavy metals. And so it is in the blood. For example, some researchers contend that patients with high levels of mercury in their mouths will often exhibit specific pleomorphic microbe-looking elements in their blood. Is it possible that something like high levels of copper, as referenced in the story we just spoke about, are more than just an irritant to the brain? Might they set up the internal environment in the body whereby the colloids of life form into specific bugs that with some level of microbial consciousness are actually behind aggressive, violent or psychotic behavior? Something to think about perhaps, and in so saying, Your blood may be much more than what you think it is. Your blood then is a reflection of who you are. Peering into the microscope and looking at live blood, you can see a reflection of cause and effect. When you're not feeling well, your blood doesn't look good. Often, the worse you feel, the worse it looks. When you get better, the blood also gets looking better. Simple correlation. Make the blood look better, you'll feel better. Clean the blood, clean your health. But something else is going on. When you feel better, often your attitude is also better. Your state of mental health is closely aligned with your state of physical health. Change physical health, and you'll often impact mental health. The reverse also holds. Change the mental, and you'll change the physical, whereas it's often reflected in the blood. Change your blood, and you'll change your consciousness. Change your consciousness, and you'll change your blood. Our blood holds elements, the vibrational imprint of who we are. It contains the signature of our soul. As the Bible says, the life is in the blood. Stories abound that correlate these truths. I recall someone asking at a seminar if anyone had ever had a blood transfusion, and then felt different afterwards. One gentleman said he had had a few transfusions, and he definitely knew it when he had received his sister's blood, because while in the hospital he had the urge to get up and start cleaning. He also knew it when he got his brother-in-law's blood, because all he felt like doing was sitting around and watching TV. A humorous story maybe, but it holds some truth. In Australia, stories are told of the Aboriginal people donating blood as urban life encroaches upon their territory. When normal white folk would get this blood during a transfusion, some have been known to wake up in the middle of the night sweating and grabbing the sides of their beds as they experience night dreams beyond any they've ever had before. Similar stories are told of individuals who have had organ transplants. Having never liked certain foods, or doing certain things, or being proficient at specific tasks, they would suddenly find themselves after the transplant with cravings for food they hate, and abilities they never before possessed. Why? The tissues of the body are fed by blood, which contains the vibrational imprint of who we are. Get someone else's blood or other organ tissue, and you have to assimilate their imprint and remake it your own. Like a giant human organic tape recorder, over time you erase their message with your own. When people have problems with transfusions and organ transplants, part of the problem lies in the vibrational makeup of both the donor and donee. In time, modern medicine may get around to understanding this, and they will discover how to electromagnetically and/or in other ways erase the donor's imprint on blood and organ tissue. About that time maybe they'll also understand more about the microbial forms in the blood, and how blood may need to be assessed and treated at our blood banks. As you get deeper into this work and research its topics, a new way of looking at health will undoubtedly begin to unfold for you. Along the way, as you hear anecdotal stories of seemingly miracle cures using these ideas, you may begin to think of the placebo effect. Scientists have studied the power of the placebo, and have seen explicitly that you can make it so, if you think it so. And what has been said of thoughts? Thoughts are things. Thoughts have power. You are what you think. And what is a thought? It's a vibration of your mental self, behind which lies who you really are, soul. And that is where the state of your health really begins. And it pushes down from there. It is a process that unfolds very simply, very beautifully. The state of your individual health is spiritually, vibrationally induced, chemically, electrically driven, and biologically carried out. The biological aspect is the pleomorphic behavior of the wiggly things in the blood. These are the microbial-looking elemental forms that exist in your blood, and will shape themselves according to your metabolic balance. Their forms, and ultimately their function, are going to be driven and decided by the environment in which they live, and which you have provided through your eating, thinking, and living. Whatever your current metabolic condition, the internal microbes or bugs will coexist with you, and will be in perfect balance. For them, whatever the environment you provide. Unfortunately, that can be very unbalancing for you. To get healthy, you must balance your internal environment, and unbalance the bugs. What are differentiation between the internal and external parasites? According to the theories of Enderlein, the colloids of life in your blood, the protists, develop according to the terrain of the blood. At some stages of their development, he said, that they are outright pathogenic and parasitic, and constitute the real fungus among us. He believes these to be true, forever with us, internal parasites. Professor Enderlein called these parasite-looking forms endobionts, from the Greek endon equals internal, and bios equals life. He said we can never separate ourselves from them. We coexist in a mutually symbiotic relationship. We give them a vehicle for life. They give us blood forms like platelets, without which we couldn't exist. The endobiont appears in all mammalian species, and has shown evidence through some of its developmental forms, to be of a plant nature. Our symbiotic union with them evidently occurred millions of years ago as our species grew into existence. Without some blood-clotting mechanism in place, mammals could have never evolved. Well, now that is some theory. From my own perspective, if this were true, it in no way counters the idea of creationism, as God simply created this incredible plan with astounding brilliance. It even throws a new wrinkle on the story of Adam and Eve. When Adam, the beginning of man, first ate a plant, herb or fruit, his form on earth was forever altered, and he would hence experience physical death. The internal parasite, which Enderlein points out actually looks like a snake or serpent in one of its developmental forms in the blood when you're dying, would one day see to it. Now you can draw your own inferences however they suit you. The most important thing is that the story as expressed by Enderlein was a theory born through observation. It just happens to be a theory that never made it into the curriculum of traditional Western medicine. This is too bad, because even though it appears to be largely unproven with the latest DNA testing, the opportunity to have it told to students of science means a couple of generations of medical practitioners missed the boat to understanding the critical importance of internal terrain investigation. Today we know that the forms which Enderlein assigned the attributes of life which denotes independent DNA, to be in reality a vast assemblage of chylomicrons, lipids, lipoproteins, globin particles, actin strands, myelin forms, and in general phospholipid particles, which in effect are the body's own cellular breakdown byproduct. Enderlein called all of these things the endobient, the internal life form, and he saw them as active parasitic agents when the forms grew in size. But in reality they are as much connected to parasites as a broken rubber band floating in water can be called a snake. Parasites having independent life and identifiable DNA are very rare to observe in the blood. The external parasites, the internal forms referred to above, is in contrast to external parasites with which we occasionally come in contact. This is the area of external microbes and parasites that, when taken to extremes, intensifies into infectious diseases and epidemics. Medicine, through hygiene, has accomplished much in this area. The fact is, opportunistic bugs, bacteria, and viruses are all over the place, including inside you, me, and others. Some of us get sick, and some of us don't. As far back as the plagues of the Dark Ages, some lived and some died. Nobody knew why. Could it be that pH balance, mineral balance, nutritional balance, all have something to do with which bugs thrive inside us and which don't? Absolutely. Disease-producing organisms love off-balance metabolic conditions. It's just like Pasteur had finally admitted, but nobody was around to hear. Until somebody listens and metabolic balancing catches on, the experts will be left confused and scratching their heads, wondering why some people exposed to certain bacteria and viruses get sick and die, and some don't. When your body's blood pH changes away from the ideal, it can become an environment for opportunistic microorganisms to grow and flourish. The buggy-looking things in the blood tell us a story of how we age and how we rot. That's right, as we age, we rot. It is part of the disease process. It is the biological aspect of aging and disease. It is this rotting mechanism that helps to do us in and turn us back into the dust from which we came. There is a pH biochemical process which lies behind this rotting mechanism, which I'll discuss in our next video to come on this subject. But you should also be aware as we talk that this is not the whole story on aging and disease, for there is also an electrical oxidative aspect. This is how we rust. The results of our study today reveals that all plants, herbs and fruits in their natural state that are created by God have the correct pH range of 7.3, which is the right alkaline base for his children to eat as good healthy foods. These plants, fruits, and vegetables should not be hybrids that have a lower pH, or in some cases, may also be high in pH that prevents your body from absorbing all the necessary minerals you need. Do the research. Don't take man's advice. Investigate and investigate again. For example, some hybrids that most people eat, thinking these are healthy foods, like the carrot, most varieties of spinach, celery, lemons, most oranges and most apples, to name a few. It is not a science to eat the right foods, that which is the right level of pH, but stay away from all acid foods, and their byproducts meaning milk, cheese and butter. Also stay away from all blood and starch foods. Blood meaning all meats including chicken and fish. All starches meaning grains, like oats and wheat, and to include most flour products to name a few. If it is dead, bury it, for it is decaying, and it is not something you should eat. God's creation, the human body, is designed to heal itself with the right pH foods. However, when the cells are compromised, with mucus build-up and growing bacteria, sickness and illness are the end results. For the cells are slowly dying off, because the lack of oxygen, nutrients and the life-given energy source have stopped. Once this happens, it brings on decay, sickness and eventually early death. So beware of what you eat. Don't take science's word. Do the research, and you will be amazed how your present health issues will be corrected and even reversed. No matter what your doctors may say, for all is possible with God our Father. If we only follow His ways as He has warned us by stop breaking His health laws, the pH miracle will take place only when you restore your blood to a normal pH range of 7.3 to 7.45. Now you can reclaim your health by eating God's given vegetables and fruits which have the proper pH range. But most important, stay away from all hybrid foods that are not created by our Almighty God. This health message is from bloodpHcontrol.com, and thank you for watching our video today.